Well, folks, in today's video, we're going to be unboxing and trying to repair an entire lot of HO scale BNSF locomotives I found on eBay. I discovered this lot a couple months ago when I was just browsing around, and I think the timing is going to be very good. Recently, I've wanted to bring back a very classic form of video here on the channel, and I want a couple of BNSF units for it, but nothing too nice. There's at least 2 units which I think might be savable, the rest I suspect will be parts. But either way, let's get these things out of the box, find out what we're dealing with by testing them, and then see if any of them can be saved. And right off the bat, there's our first unit, or at least a couple shells. This first one is for a C40-8, and then we got something which I think might be off a Mac. And then we got a good old SD70 ACE. It's missing its wheels, but it does look like the motor and everything else is intact. I believe in here we have a whole bunch more shells, just judging by the weight. Maybe a -9. And then 2 more. These are both Kato shells. Still got all the equipment for the lights in place, which is good to see. I think in this one we actually have some real locomotives right here. Let's see what the first one is. And it would appear to be an AC 4400. The wheels and drivetrain are mostly gone, but we do still have a motor in there, which is worth something. And this one is a Walthers. And then we got an SD60M, and this is one of the 2 which I think might be repairable. It appears the entire drivetrain is intact. You can definitely tell this thing has seen better days. Not much of the handrails or anything else are left, but at least mechanically I suspect that this one has a pretty good chance of starting. And here's our second locomotive, which appears to be mostly intact. I think this one is a Kato by the looks of it. We are missing the truck covers and a wheel. Everything looks pretty grimy too, which is not a great sign, but I think I might have some replacement covers for these, which might be able to get this thing going again. Finding a wheel might be a bit of a trick, but other than that, it doesn't look that bad, at least compared to some of the other models I've seen in here. No guarantees either, but if we're really lucky, I think this one might be sound equipped. It kind of looks like there's a speaker in there. That's very wishful thinking though. I think this right here mostly contains the cabs for some of these shells in here. Got some handrails and things we might be able to use. And the last 2 cabs. And then finally here at the bottom we got a couple of locomotives. I think one of these might have its wheels if we're lucky. Here we got an SD40-2. It's a really cool looking locomotive. Unfortunately, it is missing one of its trucks, but it's possible I have a unofficial replacement which might work with it. And we do have some of the handrails which we might be able to glue back on there. And for the last and final locomotive, it's another ES44AC. And we got the first truck, but not the rear one. So since some of these have one set of trucks, we might be able to swap them out and at least get one running depending on the condition. This one is definitely one of the worst cosmetically. I think we're missing pretty much every set of handrails on it, minus these 2, and we're also short one of the ditch lights. But it would appear that the rest of the drivetrain is all in there. So anyways, why don't we take all these locomotives over to the track and figure if any of these things have any chance of being saved. Got all the units all ready to go for testing here. Hopefully we've got at least a couple runners on our hands. These were the only ones out of the lot which actually had enough parts intact to even potentially start, so it's not looking great. I really don't know what the previous owner did with these things. They're all just in such bad condition. But then again, I can't complain. I only paid $17 a piece for these things, so their neglect has created a real opportunity price-wise to potentially get some good locomotives out of this lot. So let's test them all out and find out what we're dealing with here. We'll start with this SD40-2. Keep in mind this only has one set of wheels, so it might short circuit, but let's try giving it some power. And so far I'm not seeing anything on the gauge. Let's try moving it a bit here. And well, unfortunately that one does not seem to be showing any signs of life. Really not too surprising given how it looks. Guess we'll move on to the next one here and see if this will be any different. And since this one only has one set of wheels, I'm really not so sure if it will do anything, but we'll give it some power anyway. Oh, no way! Well, it's trying to run. Even just with one set of wheels, it's going. It's even got working headlights. That is insane. Well, at least we've got some potential right there. If we can find a truck for this thing, we might be able to get it going. Gotta give Walthers credit, they really do build decent locomotives. And next up we got this thing. I'm really not so sure if it's gonna go. I mean, just look how much grime is built up on the wheels. It's really not too promising, but it does have all of its wheels intact, or at least most of them, so hopefully we can get it to start here. No way. I think this thing really just needs a wheel cleaning. Well, I think we can safely call that one a runner with a little bit of work. And now on to the final unit. I actually have a pretty good feeling about this one. Mechanically, it looks like everything's intact, and I also noticed it actually says sound and power on the bottom, so if we're really lucky, this thing might even have a sound decoder inside. We'll get it all set up on the track here. I know cosmetically it's no cherry, but sometimes the looks of these things can be deceiving. Let's give it some power and see what happens here. And I do see a headlight. Let's give it a little more voltage. It is sound equipped. Oh, this thing is perfect. It's just running right off the bat. $17 for a sound-equipped locomotive. I am a very happy guy with that. I'm still going to go through it and do some work because I think the wheels and everything else could still use a cleaning, but I think we're off to a pretty good start here. I'm going to try cracking this one open either way, see if we can get it to crank over, because I have a feeling there's probably still some life somewhere in it if we try hard enough. But as for the rest of them, I'm actually feeling pretty good about this. So I'm going to start off here with the SD40-2. I just have a hard time believing that's all she really wrote. I noticed that there's this wire sticking out the side, so just with the limited contact, it might not have started for that reason. So I'll get the two probes out here and see if we can get it to start up. You hear that? So that's interesting. The motor is getting power, so it is turning over, but I'm not sure if you could see the wheels were not rotating. So clearly this thing also has a drivetrain issue as well as an electrical issue, but I don't think it's hopeless. Let's open it up and see what we can do here. To take the shell off, we have to remove both these coupler pockets, which are both being held on by different screws, so one of them is not factory. You can see that a lot of the electrical system is just gone on this side. And just as I suspected, we're missing a drive shaft. Matter of fact, we might be missing more than just the drive shaft. Yeah, the worm gear is completely gone too. So this might take some work, but a while back I got some aftermarket parts which I think might just be compatible with this. Let's see here. So this one day I was browsing Alibaba and I came across these trucks. I just ordered them up for the sake of it, and well, it's not exactly the same proportions, which might be an issue, but we're also missing a lot of parts. I think I have another one of these somewhere too, so maybe we could get both out, see if we can get some different parts in here and at least get something out of it. Went and found the other truck, so let's see if these things will even fit. And no. All hope isn't lost yet, though. A while back, a guy named Peter Wacko sent me these parts, and they're definitely not the same trucks that this locomotive is supposed to use, but that doesn't necessarily mean they won't work, so let's find out here if we've even got a fit. Yeah, I think it's possible. If I get this thing running, it's going to be pretty cursed. I wonder if the fake parts off the Mimic trucks are similar enough to work with these. Yeah, I don't think they're the same size, unfortunately. Maybe the wheels are, though. Yeah, unfortunately this is just not fitting together very well, so I don't know if that's going to work either. Well, it's now a while later, and I think I might have come up with a potential solution, and that's to modify the Chinese knockoff parts to mimic the originals. You can see the sizes are not exactly the same, and this is definitely not the right style of truck. But with a little bit of trimming here and there and adding some plastic in a couple spots, you can at least get it to fit inside the chassis correctly. So I don't think it's completely hopeless. I'm just going to quickly try to repeat the process on this truck, which was done on this one, and we'll see if maybe this will get it running again. So first things first, we need to remove a whole bunch of different pieces of plastic, and this is all just hollow stuff, so I'm not too worried about it. Just quickly shaved this down a little bit so we can fit the genuine Kato seat right on there. And then need to make a drive shaft that's about 42, and then the hexagon needs to be about 5. Here we go with the 3D printed parts. This is the very first time I've actually designed my own parts. I've 3D printed some stuff before, but yeah, this is going to be interesting here. Looks pretty good. We'll have to test if this thing can actually turn and so on, but let's just quickly apply some power to this and see what happens. Well, I think I need to shave some stuff down and rewire it, but it does seem to be kind of running. Well, it's now a day later. I was up pretty late last night trying to sort out the whole drive shaft situation, and I actually ended up having to reprint both of them for a couple reasons. The first one being that when I was testing this out on the bench, I was noticing when the trucks were at certain angles, the motor was slugging down. What I discovered is that they were actually making contact with the frame, which is obviously no good. The other issue is that the model was vibrating pretty badly, which is a sign that something's out of balance. So I had a look here, and I discovered the printer actually hadn't done a very good job towards the top. So in order to fix this, I lowered the total diameter by 1 millimeter so it could actually fit within the frame correctly. And I also lowered the print speed to 20% just so it would take its time towards the top and actually make these parts evenly and kind of balance them a little bit better. And now if we connect power to them, everything does seem to be turning quite a bit better. It's obviously not in perfect balance, and I don't know how this is going to perform under load, but why don't we take it over to the layout and see how it runs. So this should be quite telling as to how this thing is actually going to perform. Obviously, if something runs okay on the bench, it's a good sign, but in the real world, things can work a bit differently. And well, it's not in perfect balance, but it does seem to be running. Let's see how it handles the corners here. Yeah, it seems fine. Let's try it in the other direction. Well, it's still not perfect, but honestly, that's actually a lot better than I was expecting. Something I just noticed is that I think I wired this thing backwards because the front lights are going on when the engine's running the other way, so I'll probably have to flip these wires around. But other than that, I think that that is quite acceptable. I might just trim the excess parts down a little bit. That might help with the vibration issue. But otherwise, I think we've got a working locomotive on our hands here. I'm just going to go through it and add oil to everything. I suspect it has not got any in quite a long time. Well, after testing this thing on the track, it seems that the light issue is still going on, so I'm not really sure what the issue is. The only thing I can figure is that this PCB is backwards. Now, there is an arrow pointing forwards, which to me would indicate that it is the right direction already, but then again, looks like the previous owner messed around with it, so I guess I'll try flipping that around and see if it changes anything here. And it's still doing the same thing. So the only thing I can figure at this point is that the motor is wired backwards. I don't really know how that'd be possible because it's actually connected to the PCB, but I guess we could try flipping the contacts around somehow. Alright, let's see if flipping those wires around made a lick of difference. Now it's working. Well, I think at this point we can throw the shell back on this thing. We'll work on some of the cosmetics because this definitely needs some love there as well. And now I'm just going to touch the model up a little bit. I'm going to leave the little scratches on the nose and stuff. That's just patina, but in certain areas where parts are actually missing, we'll just add a little bit just to help make this thing look a little bit better. Started right up. Directional lighting is working properly. Hopefully the front lights are on. I didn't really get to see when it first went by. Oh yeah, the lights are working great. Sure, there's some people out there that wish I fixed it up using only OEM parts, but frankly, it was only a $17 locomotive, and I didn't have to put another dime into it thanks to using what I had on hand. With the current exchange rate right now, if I wanted to buy genuine parts, it would probably be over $100, which is a lot more than this locomotive's worth. At that point, you could just go out and buy a new one. So I'll take it, and also got to figure out how to use the 3D printer to design my own parts for the first time, so I'll call that a success. Anyways, let's move on to the next locomotive, which is this guy right here. So hopefully with this machine I can just repeat the process again. Obviously we have one truck intact, so that might be a good thing. Remove these screws right here and we'll see if we can actually open it up and see what exactly is still inside it. There's no drive shaft. I was really hoping one of those was going to be in there, but then again, we could just go and 3D print another one if necessary. On this side, we have a drive shaft and everything intact, so that's all good to see. Now, this is a Walthers engine. I don't know if I actually have any parts for it, but honestly, it looks very similar to the Kato, so we'll have to look around, but I bet there's something in here that could probably work. So I went digging through my spare parts bin, and this is what the search has concluded with. We got another one of the Chinese generic trucks, and this truck, which apparently is off an Atlas locomotive. I'm not really sure what kind, but either way, we'll try them both out. I already tell if we want to use this one, it's going to have to be modified because this has a peg, and this also has a post, so, you know, we'd have to try to figure out how to get those to line up. They look about the right size, but we'll have a quick look at the other one first. And this one actually has a hole, so it might be perfect for that. Get this drive out of the way here. Ooh, okay, that's definitely gonna have to be clean, but let's just find out first. Oh, lo and behold, it almost looks like a perfect fit despite being a different brand and a different style of truck. Well, that's good. Let's see if we can get this part on, because just because it fits in here doesn't mean this will seal. Well, it's going to need a bit of adjusting, but honestly, that looks fine. So now all we've got to do is, just as before, figure out how large this is, and looks like to connect the couplings we need about 45mm drive shaft. So I'll get to work designing that, print it off, and we'll check for fit. So I quickly went to the drawing board, and this is what I came up with. Hopefully it will work for our purposes here. It looks about the right size, and just as before, I slowed down the print just to try to make a neater fit, and it looks pretty good in my opinion. So we'll remove this again, and we'll see if we can get it to fit in there. This is going to be very telling as to whether or not this truck can actually work or not, because just because it fits in place and turns doesn't mean it would have the same gear ratio, especially since it's from another manufacturer. So obviously if that's the case, that's not good, because one truck would be turning faster than the other, which can cause all sorts of issues, but we'll see. Well, looks like the drive shaft is a little bit too big, maybe by about 5mm, so I'm going to try to print off another one of these just slightly shorter. Okay, here's the replacement part. As you can see, it's only about 5mm shorter, so hopefully this one will fit. Yeah, that seems about right. Swivels just fine, that's a good sign. Okay, well, I guess we'll hook this thing up to some power and see if it turns all right. Yep, and just as I was saying, just because this is turning okay doesn't mean it's turning at the same rate. So I want to do a bit of a timing test just to see just how great the gear ratio difference is. So we're going to put a timing mark on the top of that wheel. And we'll do the same thing with the center wheel. I mean, they're not perfectly at top dead center, but it should be close enough to at least see what the difference is. So I imagine if this has a lower or higher gear ratio, once we rotate it a few times, the timing position marks will be in different areas, and that will kind of be telling. So we're just going to let it run for a couple cycles here, and we'll see what happens. Well, I'll be darned. They're both still at top dead center, so I guess they must have the same gear ratios. What are the chances? It's not impossible that, given how many manufacturers have been kind of borrowing designs from each other, maybe these actually have the exact same gearing on the inside despite having a different appearance on the outside. But either way, that's awesome. That definitely gives this a much better chance at running. So now all we've got to do is we've got to first of all clean this truck. I'm going to clean this one too because we have no idea what's going on inside it. I've got to figure out which wire goes to which side and then kind of wire it all in. And then hopefully, if we're lucky, this thing will run okay. Added some chrome to the build. I know it's not going to make them look perfect, but it will at least look a little bit better than it did before. So with that truck all done, I think I'll move on to the front here and clean that out. I generally don't recommend running any parts cleaners through a gearbox like this, but with all these contacts and things like that and helix gears, I really didn't want to open this thing up and risk messing it up, especially since the plastic already seems pretty brittle, so I'll take my chances with that stuff, and I think it's going to be fine. As for details, unfortunately there's not too much to save, but I'll at least dust this thing up and touch up the paint a little bit here and there just to make it a little bit nicer. Hopefully throwing the shell on this thing won't have had any effect on the performance. Sometimes when you add the shell, the wires get pulled and stuff and it creates issues, but either way, let's give it some power here. And it started right up again, headlights working. Seems pretty good so far. One of the ditch lights is working, the other one's gone obviously, so that can't work, but yeah, other than that, I think we can safely call this thing a runner. So now let's move on to the next locomotive. I'm hoping since this locomotive has most of its parts intact, it will be a little bit more straightforward to fix up. Obviously we are missing a wheel set and the two bottom truck covers, which might be hard to source, but otherwise it doesn't appear to be too bad. I'm going to try to get the shell off here and then we'll see what things are looking like on the inside. These gearboxes are definitely going to need to be cleaned. I don't know why the rear one is so much worse than the front. Maybe the truck cover on this one came off first. I don't know. Wiring has definitely been messed with. I don't know if somebody replaced the motor at some point. So yeah, somebody has definitely had some fun with this. There's no doubt about that. I'm also noticing there's no worm gear in there. How do you lose a worm gear but have your cover still intact and your drive shaft still intact? Like, that doesn't even make sense. Well, there's another thing I guess we have to try to find a replacement for. These wheels are just like hideously dirty too. At least the gears appear to be turning properly. I just hope that nobody decided to remove that for a reason. So I think at this point, I'm just going to try to clean all these parts off camera, and then we'll return when they're all cleaned up, try to get this all back together, and hopefully this thing will work okay. I mean, it was technically running before we opened it up, but at the same time too, I didn't realize that so many parts were missing from it on the inside as well. It's frankly a miracle this thing was still running okay. I know I said I was going to do the cleaning off camera, but I just had to share some highlights of, you know, just how nasty this thing is. Like, there's old hair in here, grease. Like, what the heck happened to this? Even the outsides of the wheels are, like, covered in grime. And then just the side frames themselves. I don't think I've ever seen side frames with this much crap on them. Like, it's insane. I just cleaned out one of the oil journals, and you're not going to believe just how much junk has worked its way into these things over the years. I mean, just look at that. It's like 3 times the size of the space. It's really weird working on a locomotive that was probably manufactured within my lifetime and it being this bad. Like, I've worked on locomotives that are between, 50 and 100 years old, and the vast majority of them are not this bad. Okay, with the parts all cleaned and dried off, I think we can start to reassemble this thing. As you can see, the gears really came out looking a lot better than they were before, so that's good to see. And even more good news, I managed to find a worm gear, once again thanks to Peter Wacko. So we'll just begin slowly reassembling this thing. As you can see, some of these are cracked, so we are going to have to add some glue, but at least the gears themselves appear to be okay. It's just the sleeves that are split. This is just going to be a little secret for this locomotive. I'm going to throw in one of the knockoff wheel sets, but I think the gearing is a little bit different, so what I'm going to do is just shave off all this stuff. Now this one set will just be freewheeling in here, so we'll lose a little bit of traction, but keep in mind this whole locomotive was running with just one truck, so with two it's definitely going to be a lot better, and this would be ridiculously easy to change at some point in the future if I find a replacement wheel set or decide to order one up. And for both trucks, I managed to 3D print these truck covers, which I think are going to work pretty well. It should just kind of snap into place and kind of hold everything, and seems to work just fine. So now I can start reinstalling all this stuff. I also have to put the contacts and side frames back on. I'm going to throw some fresh wires on all the contact strips too, just because the wiring in this locomotive looks like total crap and I want to get rid of every bit of it, so I think that this will prove to be a good choice. Well, the knockoff part seems to fit in just fine there too, so that's good. Okay, I just noticed that I made a bit of a mistake here. You see that? Okay, so this is bad. I guess the color coordination is not going to work in this case, but that's fine. I'd rather have a working model than wires that don't match. I'm just going to have to be careful not to wire it backwards because of that. So with those both rebuilt, I think we can move on to actually rewiring the locomotive. Now, I don't know what the previous owner was trying to do with this thing. It looks like they maybe tried to ground it to the frame for some reason. Just got like masking tape to insulate the wires. See if we can find some good self-tapping screws for this. Decided I'll wire in a light on top of all this as well, just so something's in the cab. I think that will look nice. Okay, that all looks fine. Why don't we do a quick bench test here and just make sure everything is working properly. So first things first here. Yeah, that's nice and shorted. Those are two, but yeah, there we go. Got the wheels all polished up here. I think the difference really is night and day, so we'll take this thing over to the track quickly, just test it out, and if it works, we'll throw the shell back on it, and I think we can call it a day with this one. Yeah, it doesn't seem too bad. Well, I think that is perfectly acceptable right there, so we'll go ahead and throw the shell and body back on this thing. As for this locomotive right here, I don't even think we really need to tear it down. Just going to open it up and add some fresh oil, maybe work on the cosmetics a bit, and definitely clean the wheels up just for the sake of it. Why don't we take it over to the track, just test it out, make sure the shell didn't affect anything, and then we'll move on to just doing a little repair on this. Yeah, seems pretty good. Send her around for a lap here. Well, that seems fine to me. I'll just quickly do some work on this thing off camera, and then we'll run these things all together. Just got done with the quick servicing there. I ended up adding a pilot to the bottom and a set of horns to the top. I also gave the model an overall cleaning, including getting rid of that writing on the bottom. I also took care of the wheels too, which were in much more desperate need than I was expecting. Anyways, without further ado, we'll send it around for one lap. I mean, this basically was a runner even before I got to working on it, but this should have improved it quite a bit. Well, it seems pretty good to me, so I think at this point we'll throw all of these locomotives on the layout and run them all around together. Well folks, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. I certainly had a lot of fun fixing all these locomotives up, and I really couldn't be happier with the results. We started off with 4 really junky locomotives, only one of which was capable of consistently running under its own power. With a little bit of effort and some spare parts here and there, we've now got 4 slightly less junky locomotives, but at least they all run under their own power. Anyways, I think I'm going to call it a wrap there. I'd like to thank you all so much for watching.